Welcome to Modern Alchemy, episode number 69.
Yeah,
Where are you?
I know, I lost count.
She normally jumps in with the
69.
69 tonight. And today we're really excited because this is one of our rare spotlights, which as a viewer, you may know we don't do that frequently, but we're really excited to have Jeremy and Brielle here today to talk to us. And we want to get into the importance of relationships, romantic relationships in this case, and what it takes to make those things successful. And they certainly have some experience in that as well. Let me just tell you briefly a little bit about them. Jeremy is a host of Create Your Own Life podcast, and we've been really blessed to be a guest on there a couple of times now. So if you're not listening or watching Create Your Own Life podcast, we would highly recommend it.
Yes.
Some brilliant guests and brilliant topics that he's talking about. He studied at Oxford University. I did not know that either, Jeremy. And here's what really blows my mind. I'd love to know more about too. Masters in Early Roman Empire Propaganda.
Fascinating.
Man, how appropriate is that for today?
Yeah, apparently.
His podcast was named the #1 podcast to listen to by Inc. Magazine in 2019. Congratulations. Nice. Top 40, under 40 by Podcast Magazine in 2022. And we have the better looking half of his partnership. Brielle is with us, and they co-founded together a company called Command Your Brand, which we've also worked with, and we highly recommend. They're incredibly professional, which is so rare in today's world. You know, if you send them an email, they respond, which is just unbelievable.
What a concept.
You know, and they say they do what they say they're going to do. But it's a public relations agency designed to help entrepreneurs share their message by appearing as guests on podcasts. And so I'm going to stop there, and let's just welcome Jeremy and Brielle to the spotlight. So great to have you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. So let's have both of you. Is there anything really important? And I'll start with you, Brielle. That's important about you to you that our viewer would want to know that I didn't cover besides Command Your Brand?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess a lot of people probably don't know about me. We've been, if we're going to talk about our relationship a little bit, we've been together for 13 years, married for almost 8. We work together all the time.
Yeah.
My background is in PR, so I'm actually doing something that I went to college for, which is very, very rare.
Very rare.
True.
Yeah. And we're trying to create our own life and have a beautiful family. So.
And you do have a beautiful family.
Yes.
And that is not just a play on words or something to say. Your children are quite cute.
Very cute.
And how old are they?
We have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they're cute and wild. So.
Yeah, they're very wild.
So I'm sure they keep you busy.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. Anything else, Jeremy, you'd like to add about all the plethora of things you've done besides lift heavy weights and do things of that nature that we didn't cover?
I guess other than being a husband and father, I would say the thing I'm most proud of is my 30 chickens. That's about it.
Do you collect and eat your own eggs?
Our pig son. Our pig son.
Oh, do you really? That's fun.
So we got him as like a little bitty pig, and he used to sleep in bed with us and everything else. And then we got pregnant with the first child, and she was kind of like, I don't want him like kicking me in the stomach. And now he's like 110 pounds or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And you don't want him in the bed at that point.
No, he sleeps in the barn.
Yeah, he's in the barn. He actually helps take care of our flock.
Yeah,
so
he's
good.
a pig farmer.
So,
wow.
So he's not going to become breakfast at any point. I wouldn't guess.
Although we do eat a lot of bacon.
We eat a lot of bacon, but not his.
I love bacon. My wife has taken me off of bacon, and there's a whole Dr. McCullough reason behind that. So anyway, we maybe
Yeah.
we can get into Peter
You're getting
McCullough
sidetracked.
or maybe not. But we're getting sidetracked. And I'm curious, do you collect your own eggs and eat those?
Mhm.
Yeah. I'd say most days we get what, like 8 to 12, something like that, and we've learned to make a lot of things with eggs.
Well, it's a really great food. It's a great food.
Yeah.
So tell us how long you guys have been together. Brielle, you said 13 years, and how did you come together? That would be interesting, I think.
You could tell that story.
No, you can tell it.
Why? Oh, okay. All right. So we had this friend, and her brother's like a superstar wrestler in the state of New Jersey. Like, was always like going to state finals and stuff like that. So like her brother's like New Jersey famous. So my friend was apparently a super fan of her brother, and was like, like I'm friends with Phil's sister. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And with her, he would kind of say like,
did you know what that meant when he said I'm friends with Phil's sister? Or
I know who, like,
Oh,
Phil is wrestling royalty in Sussex County, New Jersey. So
okay.
like,
So you knew.
So from there, he would talk to me about her, talk to her about me, and tell her how uninteresting I was, and would just not introduce us. I think because he had a crush on you. And we actually ended up connecting through Facebook. I had sent her a message, and she ended up declining me because at that point in time I was really into cars, and my profile picture was a car. And from there, we actually ended up finally getting together later on. It was the night that I was writing a 20-page paper on Dante's Inferno, and we ended up talking all through that. And I texted you at 7 a.m. You said I was crazy.
I was like, what are you doing?
There's something wrong with you. And yeah, that was kind of how we met.
So
That's
7 a.m. is a bit fascinating.
Yeah.
Brielle, what were your feelings when he did that?
I was like, well, he's either crazy because we were just up like all night talking. And I was in college. He was in grad school at the time. So I was quite concerned about that. But yeah, it was very interesting because like when we first started telling people like, oh, how we met kind of through Facebook. There was a mutual friend involved, but really it was, I think I ended up writing on his wall. That's how we started talking, because I was like, oh, like Matt does have other friends. So it was like online dating before, like this was before
online dating was a thing. Yeah.
Dating or all the apps and stuff like that. So people were like, how are you meeting this person in real life? Like, yeah, it was funny.
Yeah. Well, it worked out.
Yeah.
It evidently worked out.
Dante's paper. That's
Yeah. I've got to
You got me
digress.
on that.
I know. Yeah, I got to go back to Dante, because even though that doesn't have anything to do with a relationship, maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe you can tell us.
I drug her to Dante's home when we were in Florence, so that I did do that.
Ooh,
Yes.
That's awesome.
Well, that's actually it kind of is very pivotal to our relationship, I think, is the fact that like when we first started talking, it wasn't about, anything popular going on or anything like that. We just got very interested in each other's ideas, and that's something that we've taken with us throughout our relationship.
That kind of sounds familiar.
Yes, it does. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you should tell them the story of how you ended up bringing me into your life.
Okay, yeah, let's moving on. So
No,
tell
no,
us
no.
about Dante.
No, this is fascinating.
Well,
it goes all the way back to the movie The Secret.
Come on now. Okay, so I was watching the movie The Secret, and I happened to fall asleep when I was watching it. And before I fell asleep, his part came on. I never really cared for all the other people that were on there because they didn't seem. He had like some practical things in my sense. And I remember the place that I was at my life. I would look at him and I thought, I'd really love to be in a relationship with a person like that. And it ended up being the actual person.
So there is something to the law of attraction. What are you going to say? But there was a long journey in between that.
Yeah.
So
it was like 10 years, 15 years later, boom, here he is.
Yeah, 15 years later, and a lot more gray hair. I didn't have any gray hair till we got married, but
Right.
you're doing okay, Jeremy.
He's got kids.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
The girls is definitely going to give him the gray hair.
I'm 4 years from 40. I don't have any yet. So I don't know. We'll see.
4 days from 40?
4 years. 4
4
years.
years.
Oh, 4
4
years.
years.
4 years. I thought you were having your
4 years.
birthday.
No, it's not my birthday soon.
So, if you had to say, and I'd like to hear from both of you, if you had to say there's one thing that's most important to a romantic relationship, what would you say that is? Okay,
You
Brielle.
first or me first?
I'll
Go for it.
first, Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's just listening.
Mm.
Talk some more about that.
It's not really what I'm best at, for sure. But you said most important, right?
Right, right.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, just really listening to the person and their cues and what's going on.
Yeah, because you kind of like understand me better than anybody. Like you can kind of see what's going on with me and know what needs to happen because of that.
Yeah, and it's not always just listening to what's coming out of their mouth, but also like how they're looking when they say it. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. In fact, research from, I believe it's UCSD, proves that only 4% of the message is conveyed through words, and the rest of it is through physiology and tone. And body language, physiology is the most powerful. So it sounds like intuitively, at least you know that. If you pay attention to how someone is saying something and the tone, and that gets really tough on text.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure we've all had experiences of text being taken completely.
Or emails.
Taken completely wrong. So what's the difference, in your opinion, between listening and hearing, Brielle?
I don't know.
How would you describe it?
I don't know if I have a quick answer on that.
That's okay.
Listening and hearing. We could come back to me on that one.
Jeremy, you have an opinion on that one?
Well, I think here's the difference, like, at least for me, is you listen to a lot of people, but do you really hear what they want and need, right? Like a lot of times we have an idea of what we want and need, and we want to see things through that perspective, but you have to, I don't know, actually be there, be present, and be experiencing what they're saying, right? So many times we're distracted by, I want this, or I want to accomplish this, or this person wants this. And the hardest thing can be being present and being in present time and actually experiencing what that person wants, and at least from my perspective.
And how does that fit into being a guy with Brielle?
Like my wife is interesting, right? Because she's very much like a woman that can do anything on her own, right? She's very capable of doing anything that she wants to do. And, if she wants to do a project in the garage, she can do it and accomplish it. But it's interesting because, like, I think from the same perspective, like the gender roles, like really, I think matter to you, at least how I've observed, like, your husband will hook up the trailer for you, your husband's going to make sure the firewood's chopped and you don't have to worry about that. So that allows you to totally like concentrate on, the kids and what they need. So like at the same time, you're able to really focus on what you want to do because, I'll handle the things that, like, I guess a guy should do to, kind of add something to the family. That's been my perspective.
I mean, I definitely could second that. I think as far as like, if we're gonna go back to, I guess, the hearing part and like the gender roles, like Jeremy is someone like I might ask for something, but then he also knows what I mean by that. So I don't know. It's more like he's in my head. We have that happen a lot where it's like you don't even have to say it. It's like he knows why you're asking it. I guess probably because we just have we're so intertwined our lives. Like we have like the same things that we're doing. So we kind of know like the purpose that we're going for. We know what the end goal is, like whether it's with the family or with the business or with staff, like we have all that background to it.
But I think even that, like it's more than that, right? Like we've known each other for, 13, 14 years now. And like, like for us, I think one of the most interesting things is like, we don't often have to say what the other wants. We just kind of know. Like, here's an example. This is, when did you do Rosa Trilly? Was it like 2012? She was an Irish beauty queen previously in our
Wow.
relationship. And so she was competing for Rose of Tralee, and she was in a St. Patrick's Day parade, and she had brought her cousins with her, and they were on the float with her. And you'd lost the kids, and I suddenly had this thought, Brielle lost the kids, she needs help. So I went and looked for her, and I found the kids. And in a crowd of people, like, your phone doesn't always work. So my phone finally rings, and she goes, I lost the kids. And I'm like, I know, I found them. And like, we often have like a lot of experiences like that, right? Like we know what's kind of happening, I guess, energetically with the other. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Are you familiar at all?
Which part? Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yesterday, yeah. We've actually never had this with our own children up until yesterday, where we not lost, but our 4-year-old, she went off, and Jeremy found her, and like we met each other at the same time, where like I was starting to really panic, actually.
She's like, where's Addie? I'm like, right here.
Right here. Like it was one of those moments that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I felt like that sometimes I feel like you're almost my angel. It's like, like you just catch everything that like I need.
Yeah. It's weird though, because it's like, I don't know if you guys feel this, but like in a relationship, like you can know somebody, or you can like know somebody. You know what I mean? Like kind of like be on the same wavelength, if that makes sense.
Yes.
You want to talk to that? Since she's super intuitive, and sometimes I say to her, "Get out of my head. Just get out of my head."
I think that happens when you're close with someone, and you guys are actually close and have a good relationship. That I don't know what happens. Like your energies, your body, your energy starts merging kind of together in a way, and you start picking up. Like he'll think about something, and then I'll bring it up and talk about it, and he's like, "Oh, you just took it out of my head." So it's fascinating. The stuff happens between two couples for sure.
I think it's fascinating that happens, and maybe more is the wrong word, but the descriptors that you've given us, the examples, it's happening with you, Jeremy, that you're picking up on it. I think that's really fascinating because that tends to be more of a stereotypical feminine quality, and so.
He's like, no.
Well, so she's usually making sure, like, I don't know how to describe this. Like, I'm a very cranky person if I don't eat. So many times, like, when we're going someplace, she's usually prepared beforehand, having like food ready for me, so I don't become like somebody from the Snickers commercial.
He's definitely can get very hangry. So the diaper bag is usually half kids snacks, half daddy snacks.
Yeah, don't touch daddy snacks.
That's a flashback to powerlifting days, I think. And
Yep.
I mean, I've got some of that as well. When I give blood about once a quarter.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. It's good for people and it's good for your body. But nonetheless, they give you, Oreos and chocolate chip cookies and Nutter Butters and those kind of things afterwards to get your sugar back up. And I don't get to eat those things because when I'm going out the door, I've got a little baggie and say, okay, here's your
snacks.
Here's your prepared. You're not going to eat that crap. But are you guys familiar at all with quantum physics? I'm a major quantum physics fan. Have you dabbled or studied in that at all? And I'll tell you why.
Surface level.
Yeah, I haven't really. I've been more of like a history nerd, so I could tell you anything you want to know about like things that happened thousands of years ago. But not math and science. I kind of barely made that work.
Yeah. I'm kind of in that. For me, it was philosophy and literature, but nonetheless, I'm a big quantum physics fan, and I've studied it for at least 2 decades, and I'm not a physicist, and yet arguably one of the greatest findings, and you'll find why this is important in just a moment, in modern physics is called Bell's theorem by J.S. Bell. And what Bell found is that 2 particles, you go down to the subatomic level and it's particles, and you've got the atom, and then you've got the particles, and you got the electrons and the positrons and all those things. But 2 particles that are once connected stay eternally connected across space and time. And so that's called quantum entanglement. Maybe you've heard that phrase. And so what's happening literally, and this is scientific, is that when 2 of us come together and have an intimate exchange. It happens even with a non-intimate exchange to a lesser degree, but the more intimate the exchange is, the stronger the connectivity is. And there's been studies done by U.S. Army where they've taken a cell out of a person's mouth. I'd like to say volunteer, hopefully, and put it in a petri dish. Let's say they were in California, and then they've flown the petri dish over to, let's say, Texas. And then the person in California is shown all kinds of films, humorous films, gory films, scary films, pornographic films, all these things. And when they have a reaction in California, there's an instantaneous reaction to the cell in the petri dish with no lag time. It's instant. Doesn't that blow your mind? And so that's literally what's going on when you pick up on these things. And when two partners, like the two of you, are intimately connected, then that becomes more and more commonplace. And most people tend to just brush over it and not pay attention to it, but maybe it'll give you a new perspective on it now.
Well, I'm a big believer in, like, I don't know, like, you don't really do this whole life thing once. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people kind of think like, you got this one, you better make it good, baby, because it's all over. I'm a big believer, and that's not really the case. And at least for me, and I know you and I have talked about this before, I feel like we've known each other before and we found each other again. Like, I don't know, like we have that kind of a relationship, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Do you want to talk to that one?
Yeah. and I wonder how many people actually have that experience with their partners. We had the same feeling towards one another when we first met too. We thought this all seems too familiar.
It's very familiar,
right?
And I said, and neither one of us were looking for a relationship.
No.
And I said to her one evening as we were meeting, we worked together for 3 years. We weren't a couple. We were friends. And I want to come back to you, Jeremy, and have you tell us what you think the most important quality is in a relationship, where we've spun off of hearing. But I said to her, we were talking about the familiarity, and I said, I think we've been together before.
Yeah.
And I said, and she said, yeah, it feels like that. And I said, what do you think I was? And I said, or we were? And I said, how do you think we were? And she said, well, I think I was maybe your little helper. And I
was your assistant.
No, I think it's more than that, but I didn't say that because it was
hoping.
I was hoping. And it turned out to be, but I think those things are quite fascinating, even though they seem quite mystical. So let's come back, Jeremy, to what do you believe is the most important quality in a relationship? And I'll tell you why that's important to us is because we're doing a brand new series called On Relationships, and we kind of delineated the 5-6 things that we have experienced together that have been imperative for us to build this really strong bond. So I'd be interested to hear, do you agree with Brielle, or do you have a different opinion on what's most important?
So I think at the same time, like, it's important to listen, like, and truly listen. Like, I think that's really important, but also as well. And I think looking at like, if you look at kind of like the cycle of life, right? It's, something's born, it kind of endures, and it dies, right? And that's the cycle of life. But like on a relationship, unless you're continually like creating that relationship every day, it's going to die, right? And I think that's, as business partners, that's the biggest thing I have to remember, because very often, because we're always talking about this stuff, like very often I have to remember, okay, I have to put on my husband hat now, and I have to kind of create on the relationship, right? Like we have to continue to remember to do that, or there won't really be something there. Like, like make sure we have a date night and things like that. And I know some people like to say, oh, this is our scheduled date night or whatever it may be. Like, and our lives are a little too hectic for that to happen, but we're still making sure, like, okay, so I'm acknowledging you now as my wife and as my spouse, rather than, okay, well, this is my business partner. I think it's just important to remember that, like whether it's like, hey, when you come home and I got you flowers that day or something like that, because I think like as my wife, you need that acknowledgement. And sometimes I think it could be really easy, especially with how hectic our lives are, to remember that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you have,
That's nice.
It's bears of both. That's nice. So it is nice. So we're really big on structure and rules and systems and schedules. And do you guys do you go that far with how to separate business and personal, and how to make sure you have your personal time and those type of things?
I don't really think we
I
do.
would say yes and no.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, we have, like, we kind of have the list of stuff that's, like, important to do, right? Like, so I know, like, for Jeremy, something that has to fit into his schedule every day is his working out. So there's things that are, like, but everything's kind of in flux. I mean, I guess because with us, too, we also have, like, we have help at the house. We have an au pair that lives with us. But as part of that, we're still trying to, like, make sure that she gets an interesting cultural exchange. So it's like we almost have a third kid as well, even though she's helping.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of structure. Like, you're always sending me Google Calendar invites. Like that's true.
That's the extent of our
Meet me downstairs at 11.
Yeah, and I think here's the thing that's difficult too. So my parents, like, typically live in Florida, but this over the summer, like, they're retired, so they've been kind of living with us here in New Jersey for the summer. And the difficult thing is, like, my dad is kind of this, like, you eat dinner at 5 or 6 o'clock every night type of person. So, like, if I run into him at some point during the day, I'd be like, what's for dinner? I'm like, I don't know. It's 3 o'clock. We've got like 2 to 4 hours before I even have to worry about this. So, like, we're structured, but we're not, if that makes sense. Like, we have our battle plan of things we want to get done through the day, and we define that. But I wouldn't say, like, it's regimented about when we're doing it. We just want to get that product done. Like, we were on Friday and then also today, we were working pretty solidly on our brand standards. And we really wanted to get a brand standards document together. It ended up being, like 65 pages or something like that. We got the whole thing together, and we got that project done. Now, that project was Friday during the day. It was a little bit over the weekend, and it was half of this morning. But for us, we're more, I guess, like,
I'd say product oriented.
Like,
this is the top priority. This is what has to get done.
We'll get this thing done rather than this is the times to get this thing done.
Yeah, it's too much in flex, I think, especially with interviews, and some of our team runs his schedule more than I would schedule.
Yeah, like, I know we even had to reschedule this conversation because Rebecca that runs our schedule. Rebecca that runs our scheduled looking just at my calendar and not Brielle's, and I'm like, hello, she exists.
Like, I do have a Calendly too. My Calendly is pretty good, but we have too much in flux at the moment.
So would you say that if you have a list of priorities, that's more like a to-do list, and they're in priority order, and how you have to get them done? Is that more how you operate?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Like the highest priority through the lowest, for sure.
Because we're more interested in getting it done and getting it done right than how much time it takes us, if that makes sense. So for me, like, we're going to start something, change it, and stop it, and it's done. Rather than, like, all right, we kind of got a little bit done. Good job, guys. We're going to work on it tomorrow. Like, we just want to get something done.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Do you have any comments to that?
I like that.
Sounds like we have very different
lives. It's very different from how we operate.
Yeah, no, it is. I like the whole getting it done thing, because we have things that are going on, and it's you can't. We have to stop, because everything that we do is structured and scheduled and on the calendar, literally everything. So it's like, okay, I got these hours here where I can do this.
One of the things, and I've been on the planet longer than Beersheba and longer than you guys as well. Yes, definitely. One of the things I've learned is that, in my experience, there's always going to be something to get done.
True.
I've never reached a point where it's done, and so.
That is a lesson I've learned. Working with him.
Yeah, it's been very difficult for this Capricorn to let go of and say, hey, okay, at some point you got to realize there's always going to be something to get done. Otherwise,
true.
And I've had those times where I was up till 2 or 3 a.m. and sometimes that has to happen, but a lot of times, then you get really out of kilter, if you will, and I've learned in my experience I've never been very good in relationships, and until I think I'm pretty good now.
Well, we work together, yeah.
We do, and I want to talk about that too.
If we didn't, it'd be a problem.
It would be a problem. It would be a
No,
problem.
I'm sure if you guys, because you guys are partners together, right? If you were in a
Yeah.
relationship that the person didn't work with you, there'd definitely be problems of why are you not spending or paying attention to me?
Oh, you mean working together? Yeah, like as
In
business
work.
partners.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't get how other people don't do
Yeah.
it. Do you know what I
That's
mean?
what we say all the time.
Because it's
Oh,
like,
do
all right,
you?
well, if we're traveling, well, this is for work and it's also a family vacation. Or like, you know, if there's a big project happening, like we know why we're working extra time or whatever it may be.
Because we're on the
Right.
same, like we're literally on the same exact page. And then we
Yeah.
also could say, hey, you know, I know that this is important to you right now, but right now this family thing is more important.
Mm-hmm.
So let's put that away for the moment, and this can come back. Like we can
Mhm.
handle this tomorrow.
She's better at that than I am, I will say. Like that's where Brielle's really good is, like, I always like to say, like, I'm kind of a buzzkill where she's like more of like a sense of adventure.
Yeah.
And like, you know, like I'm more of the like regimented, like, you know, this right now, and I'm working on this right now, and I'm not going to stop until I've done this thing, where she's kind of like, hey, you know, like you're alive, right? You should remember to like do this whole like living thing.
Mhm.
And I think that's where we fit together well.
Well, you brought up the signs briefly earlier, but he's a Taurus and a true Taurus, and I'm an Aquarius. So typically it's not like any sort of a match, I don't think.
Oh,
No,
wait,
it's
wait, wait,
not.
wait. What's your birthdays?
You-
Hold
you-
on. I'm
you've
going to
got-
look it up while he's asking the question.
I'm May 15th and she's February 16th.
Oh, she is an Aquarius. She's a true Aquarius.
Yes.
May
She-
15th.
she's a-
I'm going to look it up.
Brielle, you're,
He's May 15th.
Yeah.
Brielle, you're a cliche in this time in,
Oh,
in
you're-
the universe, the age of Aquarius, right?
I don't know.
You
You know, like
don't
a
know
song about that?
there is, but
It's like
Yeah.
like a bird song or something, isn't it?
yeah, it's old. It's
Oh,
old.
here,
It's older than me.
May 15th, right?
Yes.
So in Vedic astrology, which is supposed to be the oldest, the first, I believe.
It's not supposed to be. It is.
It is.
It's the original.
Yeah, you're right on the cusp of Aries and Taurus. So you're in Aries and Taurus. Maybe that's why you guys get along.
I don't know. I'm kind of like, I'm going to keep running into that wall and eventually it's going to break. You know what I mean?
That's your
And
Taurus.
she's like, hey, maybe we should like consider looking at the wall differently or look at a different wall or something like that.
Or the
Yeah.
door.
Well, if you look,
Oh, my
now that
goodness.
we've opened this Pandora's box, if you
See, now you
look
hit the thing we talk about all the time.
well, us too. We
Oh my goodness.
we talk about these things. We do courses on all these mystical types of things, and as well as
Yeah.
very practical. But nonetheless, if you were a full-on Aries, here's the I like to call a full-on Aries a hay bale.
Yeah.
You know, you light a hay bale on fire, it's like, and then it's done. It's over, right? They don't see it through. They're good start, no finish. Then you got the Taurus is a slower start. It's a bull, but you're not stopping it once it gets going.
Yeah,
so,
you can never stop it.
so if you're, and that's an earth sign, and obviously Aries is a fire sign, and Aquarius is an air sign. With water, if you look at it's pouring the water,
Oh, yeah.
which is, yeah, I could riff on that stuff all day. It's probably, Aries is blows like the wind, or not Aries. Aquarius tends to
Aquarius.
blow like the wind and isn't real rooted in stereotypically.
But it's the more matured air sign.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the most mature air
Yeah.
sign.
Yeah.
Whereas Aries is the baby. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Aries is the baby.
is the baby of the entire zodiac. So nonetheless,
Fascinating.
I'll tell you what
I don't really blow like the wind, but sort of.
You're
Yeah.
definitely a freer spirit than I am.
Yeah.
yeah.
He's
Well,
the bull.
you're the bull. Yeah. So nonetheless, I'll tell you what we determined when we were doing this series on relationships. We determined that the most important quality, and this is going to sound counterintuitive to a lot of our viewers and maybe even to you guys, of a successful romantic relationship is friendship. And we
Yeah.
we literally spend 24/7 together.
Yeah.
Like
That's not an exaggeration. We're 24/7, and
Mhm.
and she's very independent. You mentioned that about Brielle. She can do whatever she needs to do on her own. I know that. I'm very independent, and we both are very good alone. And I've never been very good with anyone else for very long, but now this it has changed in
Yeah.
this relationship, and because we're best friends. And I think what really helped us is that we were friends for 3 years before we got romantically involved, which is very atypical.
Mm.
Very atypical.
Well, you and I were just talking about this last night. Like we have like lots of friends and people like that they like go on separate vacations, or they like, like do things about like we don't really do that. You know what I mean? Like even business trips, like a lot of times like a business trip is a family trip. So it's like, I don't know,
Mhm.
like we enjoy each other's company a lot, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, we had a lot of clients in 2020 who were locked down with someone they didn't like, and they
That's tough.
realized it is tough. They realized, I don't like this person, and I can't go anywhere. I'm stuck in the house with them. I can't.
Yeah,
It's
we
really,
had somebody that had a divorce in our family due to partially due to 2020.
Yeah, we did. We had a divorce in the family from 2020.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
understand where you're going with that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's sad.
You get locked in the same place and you don't like each other. You're gonna find out pretty quick.
yes. There's
Now
nowhere
you know
to
why
hide.
you've been avoiding each other so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really would like to go to work.
Yeah.
And, we do a lot of creative things, like we dress for work every day, and we kind of make a game out of it. And then when we roll up at night, we go downstairs and we go home. Our offices we're upstairs right now, and all of our work is
Yeah.
upstairs. And then we go downstairs and go home, and we change clothes, and now we're home.
Mm.
And so a lot of those little things have been really helpful for us. It seems simplistic, but it's been helpful to kind of separate. And we do our very best. I'd love to hear how you guys handle this. We have dinner together every night, and we do our very best not to talk about work at all.
Yeah, we don't do a good job at that at all.
Yeah, I see a lot of differences here, but that's all good differences.
Yeah.
I think because we're not on a schedule for the most part. We typically work in our gym clothes.
Yeah, like I'm always like good from like the waist up, because that's usually where I'm on camera. You know what I mean? And it's like sometimes my hair's combed, sometimes it's not. If I have a lot of calls that day, I'm not gonna have a hat on. But the thing we did, which I think was a big deal, and this is more because we have kids than about like life, is like when you're home, your kids always want access to you, and we've always worked from home. We've been running this business since 2015, and we've always worked from home. And we actually took a couple years ago, and we remodeled our entire garage. And her dad and her stepdad and I like did this whole project where we actually we took it and we reframed the whole thing. We re-insulated the whole thing. We had an electrician come in and wire the whole building, and then we made it into like our ideal office space. And
nice.
We work in our garage, and when we're done, we turn off the lights, we close the door, and we're done.
We
walk up to the house. Now that doesn't mean we're like done with work from that, because here's the thing that's difficult, right? Like especially with like topics I cover with the podcast, is like I'm always like moving mentally on something, and Brielle is like my sounding board. So like I'm always gonna like ask her opinion on something, like, hey, I read this, or I saw this, or what do you think about this, or what should I like. She's also really good from a PR perspective. Like she'll be like, why the hell did you do that? Like that's not a really good idea. That's a really bad PR thing to do. Let's take that down. So like it's like we're always kind of iterating on stuff, if that makes sense. Like sure, we're out of the office, but like what we do is our life.
There's two parts to our work. There's the actual business with our clients, and then there's the podcast, which is another that's
it's a big part of our life,
which that's kind of always going because it's
the media cycle is always moving. Yeah. So it's like I'm always like on the next story or talking to the next person, or something statistically just happened. Like I know like recently we've been doing a lot on YouTube, so we had our YouTube following double in just the last month. So we've been like kind of moving on that. So it's just how life works.
Yeah.
So
we're like that too. You can't, when you own your own business, you can't really just shut it off.
No.
There's no shutting it off.
Well,
There's
and
no I'm traveling and can't answer my email. Really?
no, there's
Out
not.
of office is so funny because I'm always out of office. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we're really blessed in that the things that even talking about Aquarius and Aries and Taurus and those type of things and many more, the things that we do for work or culture, which is a big part of what we do with
Yeah.
businesses, those are the things that we like to talk about anyway. So
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
like even though it could be called work, it's not really work. It's kind of play.
Yeah, it
And
sounds like they have the same with that.
yeah, I know, Jeremy, that you've shifted gears on your podcast, and I recently, I don't know how recently, but I know
2020.
2020,
Mhm.
you're a lot more edgy than you were initially, and maybe edgy is not the best word, but yeah, I'd like to hear, because there's philosophies that we worked with a marketing group previously, and their whole philosophy was, well, don't take a real hard stand on this one position because you'll alienate potentially half your audience. My position is, okay, if I'm going to alienate half the audience, then that's not my audience. And so I'm going to, and my tweet today was, if you can't be honest, regardless of the consequences, then you're living in fear and you're untrustworthy. And so,
Yeah.
Brielle, as a PR person, if you were my PR person, and I know you are with Jeremy, what's your opinion on that? Because there's two sides of the coin.
We lost.
You lost for a second there. You
I
froze
heard,
for a second.
Brielle, if you were my PR person, I think I
Yes.
know where you're going with it, but that's
Yeah.
close.
What would you say to that angle? Because there's two sides of the coin. Hey, don't alienate, or there's take a hard stand and attract, if you will, the audience that you're looking for.
I would say the first thing you would have to do is, like, it would depend on who, like, what type of business you have, right? Like, if we are trying to sell cookies, okay, fine. Like, you don't want to alienate that audience. But if you're doing anything that, like, you have a lot of heart, you have a lot of passion, that's part of your mission, then you need to be authentically you. Yeah, the more that you're you, the more that you're going to resonate and empower and just really create a passionate base. So
You got more balls than that, honey. Like, I've seen you down at the state capitol protesting for vaccine mandates and stuff like that my whole life. Like she is one tough cookie. Like she wears her beliefs on her sleeve.
As a mother, I mean, that's something, but I wouldn't personally usually put that through to the business, because that's not.
No, it's true. Yeah.
Because I do have different hats, so it would depend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What it is. Yeah.
Well, it's also, I think, how it's communicated. I think that's something you've pushed me a lot with, right? Like, it's, you were kind of a little nervous at first when I started talking about the things I always talk to you about in private, like on the podcast.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things you liked about me is that I was like able to hold a conversation on this stuff, because you've always been pretty political and stuff like that. So, like, the thing that you've helped with is helping me communicate what needs to be done while kind of keeping me out of trouble too, because I'm very good at getting myself into trouble.
So let's get into trouble. And Brielle, if you don't want, if you don't want to get into trouble, then
let us know.
Then just let us know. But we're talking about relationships here, and obviously, and I'll keep it less edgy. There's a big drive with, and I will say, with the LGBTQ movement and with the culture in general, to very apparently, and it's very clear in our perspective, to drive the family unit apart and to minimize reproduction, if you will, children and family and core unit. And as we all know, there are those who are saying, hey, the parents aren't meant to train the children about sex and sexual behavior. The school system's going to do that. And on and on and on and on. And so as parents, And as a couple,
Mm-hmm.
share your thoughts on all of that, and how important is it?
I mean, I think that you should just preserve a child for as long as possible. That innocence, that excitement, that everything is beautiful. Like the other day, we were getting ready to go on this small trip for the weekend, and I have different bathing suits out, and my daughter goes, "Mommy, wear this bikini. You look so beautiful." And I was like, normally I wouldn't wear it because we've had a very fun winter and I've been enjoying lots of food. But she was like, "Mommy, you just look so beautiful." And I was like, okay, like in your eyes, if that's what you see and you think like it's a pretty suit and you think I look beautiful, then yeah, like they are just wonderful.
Yeah.
So I don't think that you should be talking about sexuality to a child because they don't even understand what that is until they're mature enough, like to even start approaching that subject.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a little more sinister.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more sinister than that.
I'm
I think
with
you're
you.
right. But
I'm
I
with
think
you.
it's more of like in Mao's Cultural Revolution, they created kind of two groups. There were the black identities and the red identities. And the red identities were kind of the good communist identities, right? You could be a good kind of revolutionary or whatever it may be. And if you look at who Mao targeted, he targeted the youth and the college students because the goal was to separate them from the children, right? And if you can separate parents from children, you don't really need the parents because they're going to die eventually. Like, but if you get the kids, you got the next generation. To me, that's the whole thought process, at least my perspective. And I think that's why it's important. Like Brielle and I are homeschooling, and she's done so much with the kids with, like involving counting and like, hey, we're getting the eggs and like things like that. And I think just making it a part of life. And I think that's why it's so important that we take responsibility for our kids.
Yeah. I mean, we live in a very good area. Like one of the reasons that we moved out here was because everybody shares similar viewpoints to us, which is nice. Like we actually almost thought about putting our children into public school because of it. And even the kindergartners, I mean, what we were just talking to other parents about who do go to the public school is they can opt out where we are in most of the curriculum if they wish. The only thing that's mandated is to be able to discuss, like, to be able to properly identify all the body parts, which I could see their viewpoint on that, because if a child was being harassed, they should be able to correctly explain what's happening, and not to make it sound like, oh, this is funny, or like it's not cute, like if this is happening.
Yeah.
So I do understand that viewpoint and our school's reasoning for that. But anything above that, I'm like in complete disagreement with.
Yeah, I got kicked out of pre-K and barely made it through kindergarten, so it's like I just don't want that same experience for my kids. Like I was somebody that I was like a really smart kid, and they're like, hey, like if you want to stay here, you're going to have to take ADD medication. And it wasn't that, it was just because I wasn't stimulated, right? So I wanted something that was going to challenge me. And I know my kids, they are way smarter than I was. So like at the same time, like I just think that's putting them in a situation where, the curriculum could be great and everything else, but in my opinion, I think the mental health side of things is pretty sinister, and I want to protect my kids from that.
Agreed.
Yeah, good for you. So
Yeah.
what do you think? Here we're going to get in trouble. What are your, and we'll just talk about our beliefs, and you as a viewer, you can agree or disagree. I respect all beliefs, and you don't have to agree with us to have your own opinion. Everyone deserves that. And so what do you think is behind, it's fascinating with the Chairman Mao analogy, and it brings up, social credit scores and all those kinds of things, which we're hearing about. What do you think the sinisterism behind it is, in your opinion, Jeremy? What's the end goal?
I don't know. There's a lot of different ways it could go, right? Like there's kind of the perspective of, are we kind of centralizing more for like control, or, like there's, I guess, so many different threads on this, because if you look at even, the early 1900s, we've been talking a lot recently about like Woodrow Wilson and a lot of what Woodrow Wilson did to the country, and what he started was kind of this centralization. And I think that's really what I think is kind of the plan is just centralized control a lot more. I don't know who the controlling body is. It's somebody out there. There's lots of theories and ideas and things as what that may be. But to me, it seems like there's more of an idea to kind of control us as people.
I think that I just want to say, like, I definitely respect everyone for who they are. But by the same token, I think a lot of this is being pushed by some sort of depopulation.
Yeah.
Eugen-
Depopulation agenda.
Eugenics.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, it's because you got to look at it, right? Like how I talked about, in my belief, I feel like I've known Brielle before and stuff like that. Like, I don't think these evil people go away. They just kind of die and come back and find a new way to do it. You know what I mean? So I think at the same time, they're working on their latest game, and they've always been there through the centuries, right? And it's just up to good people to stand up to what they see isn't correct.
Yeah.
Well, if you obviously you've studied history, and you study any history, even at a cursory level, and you'll see that sinisterism has always been there, and
Yes.
and it just seems to have become more front and center in the last, I guess, 3 years. It appears to be, and so
Yeah.
I find it fascinating, the whole depopulation programming, because if you look at the real statistics, population is shrinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
the first
shrinking.
time in history, they said.
Yeah, I think it's the first time in history America has a negative birth rate. I have to check that stat.
I think this year.
This year, yeah.
Even Japan,
But
Japan is way down, and why is that? We're talking about relationships here. Why is it, in your opinion, that less young people are getting married, and even less than that are having children? Why is that, if you had to guess?
What do you think, honey?
I mean, one thing we used to talk about a lot that I think could be very relevant is, if you go back to even just like student loans, I think making everybody go to college and making it so that everybody goes to school. Now everybody's paying for a mortgage before they even start their lives together. So you're kind of just making people really start their lives later.
Yeah. It's like debt slavery. Like, you're getting out of school for a lot of people having what is equivalent to or more than a mortgage, and you're paying for that. You don't have a house or anything else, and so your need for money is
to like, you're not ready yet to get into a relationship because you have this other obligation, back to our debtors.
I just even think there's too much of an emphasis on education, right? Like, it's, I have a master's degree I don't use. Like, you're one of the few people I know that uses your college degree. So I just think at the same time, we kind of walk into this world where you're told you need this piece of paper, and if that piece of paper doesn't work, you need a bigger piece of paper or a better piece of paper or a more expensive piece of paper. And it's just, people are left paying for something they can't pay off because they're never going to be able to get a job that pays them enough to pay it off because they've been educated too much.
They're not ready to start a family, and they're not ready to settle down with anyone because they haven't hit, like, once you come out of school, you're then supposed to get that good job, and if you don't have that good job, then you're waiting to get that good job before you start the next step, and it just kind of is making everybody get started later in life.
Well, I got started when I was 55, so I can say that I'm in that category. I was a confirmed bachelor supposedly for a long time, and I got broken down, and I'm really grateful to God that I did. And I think economics is certainly an issue. Do you believe there's more to it than just economics, though?
Yes and yes and no. Like, I think at the same time, there's people that have talked about human beings being like kind of useless eaters in a lot of way. And I think when you look at it that way, less of us were going to consume less resources. That's what I think there's a group of people that really want that. And here's the issue, right? Like, you look at it, we know the names and the faces of, like, the Bill Gateses of the world, the Klaus Schwabs of the world, and things like that. But here's the thing. I did an episode recently about George Soros, and it's like, you look at it, I think they're the front people. You're never going to know the real people that are pushing this stuff because then they'd be easy to target, right? So there is an agenda, I believe, to reduce us, make us less capable because these, people that we don't know about want some sort of control.
Yeah.
I happen to believe that they're part of this gender dysphoria and depression and porn and many things play into this idea. I mean, if you look, there's current research that a lot of young men have no drive to even have sex, and they have no desire to even go on a date.
Yeah.
And where's that coming from? That's not economic.
Well,
I
the
don't think.
testosterone counts are way down too because all the
Way
plastics
down.
and stuff we consume.
Way
Oh,
down.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, Berspa and I get our blood tests done every 6 months just to make sure everything's working correctly. And the guy that we work with was talking about that just last time we spoke with him, that he
Yeah.
said, I'm taking testosterone levels of guys in their 20s who, it's unbelievable. They're in the tank.
Mhm.
Their testosterone's in the tank.
That's crazy.
And so there's a lot of things going on that I believe are feeding into this. And I believe, like you do, if I'm reading between the lines correctly, and I think I am, that
Mhm.
it's orchestrated. It's
Yes.
not just happening. It's orchestrated. You know, if we can get young men addicted to porn, and then they start to disassociate. First of all, you're a voyeur. You're
Mhm.
you're not involved. You're watching two people, and just think
Mhm.
about the psychology of that. And then there's no romance, there's no love, there's no kissing, there's no cuddling, there's none of that, you know. And so now I've been watching that, and we know some kids who are not even teenagers yet who are watching that.
Yeah.
And that's the programming. And so now,
Yeah.
let's say I grow up and I'm in my 20s. Well, it's kind of flat because
Yeah.
I'm burnt out, and nothing is the same as what I've been watching. And so there's a whole lot of agendas going on here, and it comes back to where we began, I believe, in
Yeah.
the family unit.
Yes.
You know, Gen X, you guys are probably, I would guess, both millennials. Yes.
I'm kind of on like the older millennial edge of things since I
Yeah.
was born in the 80s, but like, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I'm right
Yeah.
now.
I mean, Gen X was the most underparented generation in our history, and it just continued, you know, because in Gen X is where the parents weren't home. When I'm on the back end of the baby boomers, which means I missed all the Woodstock and the drugs and the fun, you know, because I was way too young, and I'm grateful for that too. But nonetheless, when I came home from school, mom was there every
Yeah.
night. Mom was there, and she talked to me about my school day and what'd you learn, and we
Yeah.
had this conversation, and so Beersheba didn't have that experience.
Well, I'm border millennial and Gen X. Half the time I'm PO'd. The other
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
the other half I feel pretty good.
yeah.
Yeah.
She's confused, and then she gets pissed about being
Yeah.
confused. You know, because Gen X is mad about everything. You know,
Then
they
I want to make an
There's
impact.
so much
they create,
angst.
yeah, they created grunge and the band Rage Against the Machine. You
Yeah.
know, and so
So
anyway,
I'm curious, did you guys have your parents growing up, or how was your household like?
I had my mom home every day. My dad, would be out of the house working, but like it wasn't until I was in high school that he even had to like travel more than 10 minutes from the house for work. So
Oh,
for me,
nice.
my parents are always around.
Mine was a little bit different, but here and there. Yeah, my mom, she's a chiropractor, so I was kind of always part of the mom running the business. She was more of like the head of the household. She had a very, very busy practice throughout our childhood, but she had a very structured schedule. That's probably why I'm not structured, is because she was very structured. So there were some days she made her own schedule. So 2 or 3 nights a week, she wasn't there after school, but my parents were also divorced when I was younger. So my dad actually would be there when we got home from school, and we'd go by him on those nights that she was working. So the nights that she wasn't working, she was home with us. So, yeah.
So
it was very different. We have very different upbringings.
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
talk about that a lot.
So
Yeah. Upbringing, socioeconomic brackets, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
so I'm curious about this: religious upbringing or non-religious?
I was a Catholic theology major in school, so I have a
Wow.
double major in Catholic theology and Torah. But I was always somebody that was kind of like looking for something.
Wow.
And
No, go ahead.
when Brielle and I first got together, she introduced me to Scientology, And we've both been very, you've been very active as a Scientologist your whole life, and I've been extremely active since we got together.
Yeah. So I'd say we're both very spiritual. We like with our children. Like we still have them baptized Catholic, but
yeah, it's they still have their baptism and everything else, but we've been very practical as Scientologists.
Brielle, did you grow up in a religious household or no?
I mean, not religious, but very spiritual household.
Yeah. That's cool.
So Torah studies.
Yes. I've always been looking for something. You know what I mean? I've been like, I think this is something that you said about me when you met me. Like, I'm a seeker. I'm a seeker. I'm somebody that's always looking for something. And I think for me, that's why I've always studied different religious texts and stuff like that. Like I've, read Lao Tzu, and I've read a lot of different stuff. And it's just, for me, I've always been somebody looking for something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you like Scientology if you were to compare it? Or what are your thoughts on it? I don't know much about it.
It's more practical than anything. Like I think for a lot of religions, like it can be like, you pray and do these different things, but as a Scientologist, like you're actually trying to actively improve yourself every day, right? Like how can I be a better person? How can I function better? How can I, have a better moral code? And so for me, it's like, it's called an applied religious philosophy, where it's something you're actually applying day by day in order to improve your life. So for me, it's been something that's made me a better person.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, good. Good for you. I have a very, very pristine copy of the Zohar in my office. So, I really resonate with I was raised
Torah.
Christian, but I resonate with the Judaic as well, which is part of Christianity, obviously.
Yeah.
Christianity owes its roots to Judaism. So you homeschool your kids. I've thought about that. I knew you did.
We're rather new at it. I wouldn't say like, you know what I mean? It's,
we're still in the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah, she's 4, so it's like, it's not gonna be 5 till October. So we've kind of started some basics.
So is there a school to go to learn to be a good homeschooler? Because I've thought we don't have children, but I've thought, given where the school system's going, if we did, we would be with you guys. I believe we probably would not want to throw them in, but I know some people who are homeschooling, and I look at the so-called teacher and I go, whoa, I'm not sure what these kids are learning, And
well, it's different though, because I think if you look at it, like how we're taught, like schooling is like everybody sits down and there's lessons, whereas homeschooling is more like individualized. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times kids are going through things at their own pace and whatever it may be. Like we're also, the lake we live in has a homeschool group. So there's other parents homeschooling. So Brielle is very active, all the homeschool moms and stuff like that too.
Yeah. We're actually looking towards more doing unschooling, I guess is the term, where like we're following their passions, following what they're interested in, not like structured every day. Like, okay, now we do the math and here's the math, or, more following their interest led.
Ah,
interesting.
Fascinating.
Is there a handbook for homeschooling or something?
I do have curriculums.
Yeah, we're looking at like a combination of the Ron Paul curriculum, and then there's also some other stuff you're working on as well.
Interesting.
I think we're going to do a hybrid of different programs that we're interested in.
Yeah.
Depending on what subjects.
Okay.
So how do you harmonize your work, Brielle, which obviously you're very, very active in, and homeschooling? And, how do you, and even
being a mom,
a mom can be a full-time job, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. How do you keep all that in check and keep the balls in the air?
Yeah. That's one thing where we're very lucky to have help. So we do have the au pair who lives with us. She's with us with the kids for 45 hours a week, usually, depending on, that's not just watching the kids. It's also helping us with, kind of like a mother's helper, because I can't do it all with everything. So we're very grateful to have somebody like that with us. And right now where we're at is with the kids in school, about 30 minutes to an hour a day is what they would be doing for 3 or 4 hours for kindergarten. It's like most of it is play. So that's kind of like the thing that we're focusing on the most right now, is making sure that they're playing. They're outside Jeremy mentioned, we live in a lake community.
Yeah, it's like a lot of like I think the thing is, and this is something more that you've taught me, is like is making like life a teaching opportunity. So for example, like last night, my 4-year-old was setting the table, and I'm like, okay, honey, so how many people do we have here? She starts counting. She's like, we have 6. I'm like, great. I'm like, how many forks do you have? She's like, I have 3. I'm like, okay, so how many more forks do you need? She's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need 3 more, Daddy. Good. Go get 3 more. Like, do you know what I mean? But it's the basics of like, it's things like that you wouldn't consider, and making that into like a teaching opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, where we were, I don't know if you guys are familiar with cicadas, but they have
these little bugs that make a lot of noise.
They're almost like a grasshopper, but it's the summer noise that's
yes
in the woods. And they live underground for a few years, and then they come up. So anyways, when we saw the shells that were on the tree, and it's kind of like when a snake sheds its skin. So first she thought it was the bug, so we're looking at it, and then, we're like, oh, and then we actually found the bug. So then we start reading about the bugs, and we're that's what we're trying to do is like, okay, so here's the real world, and this is the context that you need to know around it.
Yeah. Like we went to a birthday party the other day, and one of her little friends was having a reptile person come and bring different kinds of snakes and different kind of
constrictor.
Yeah. So we, in the car on the way there, she's like, well, Daddy, what's a reptile? So then Daddy and Mommy are explaining, what is a reptile and how does that differ from a mammal, and like where the names come from and what are the Latin derivatives, and like those are the kind of things like we do with them, right? Because then like she actually has a concept of it and she can get it.
And we spent literally the 30-minute car ride on the way to this birthday party. We spent explaining it, and Jeremy, he also didn't go over earlier about his background in Latin. He's
12 years of it.
He spent 12 years of Latin. So you could pretty much take any word in the English language.
I had to translate Virgil in order to graduate without a dictionary.
Wow. Hats off to you. I would imagine after translating Virgil without a dictionary, building a business was a cakewalk. It's like,
well, that's what somebody the other day put up a picture of their travels to Rome, and I don't know if you've ever seen like the Parthenon. Sure. On the front of it, it has in Latin it says Marcus Agrippa built this, and I go to my friend, I'm like, isn't it funny to have a place like Rome where somebody's like, I built this thing. Funny thing is, he built the one before it, and the one he built actually burned down, so he didn't build the one that's up. But like, it's fun traveling when you can like go around a place. Like we've been to Italy a bunch of times and Greece a bunch of times, and like we can actually like comprehend and understand.
Yeah. So he's the guy to go to Italy with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our tour guide.
Have you been to Thermopylae?
I have not been to Thermopylae. We have been to Rome a bunch of times. We've been to Delphi. We've been to we've been to one of the Greek islands. We got engaged in Athens in front of the Parthenon.
Oh no.
So like we've had some cool experiences. We travel a lot.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your kids are not spending their entire day on an iPad.
No.
No
screens.
Yeah, we have no screens policy.
I mean, Saturday mornings will allow some cartoons and maybe to wind down at the end of the day for like 15 minutes. But
yeah, we don't do a lot of screens.
Yeah, we don't.
God bless you.
Oh, good for you.
I think
that's awesome.
Really important.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So Modern Alchemy is the name of the podcast. Alchemy is about transmutation. Yeah. Transmutation is about taking something of low value, something challenging, and turn it into something of high value. And so, curious, what's the toughest challenge you two have faced together?
Which one do you want?
The toughest.
The toughest.
I would say the toughest for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the second iteration of our business, and
yeah,
we had to make some very hard decisions because there was one other business partner involved, and we had to decide to go our own way. But it was
not make any money for a good 3 to 6 months while we still paid people from the money we didn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then also as well,
we
like
know that feeling.
But
yeah, you look at personally though too, like how long were we together when my mom had her stroke? Like, that was tough. And, like you were the person that drove my dad and I to the hospital. And like, you were, you ran a fundraiser where you raised $13,000 to pay for all my medical bills my dad couldn't pay and stuff like that. So it's like we've been through, like, that's why it's like, which one? Because like we've had a lot of things we've worked through.
Wow.
So if you had to pick one between the two you've described, and I'm sure there's more, was it the illness, or was it the business that was most difficult? And then I have a follow-up
Business
question.
is pretty hard.
I would say it was the business, because we
That's
had
pretty-
somebody who wasn't a part of our relationship, so didn't have the same goals, but definitely was
Creating problems in our relationship.
yes. So
And it was our partner.
yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the follow-up, and I'd like to hear from both of you, and we'll start with you, Brielle, because Jeremy and I tend to talk more than you and Bersabeh.
I do talk a lot.
Yeah, so do I, and I'm okay with that. But nonetheless, Brielle, what'd you learn? What's the biggest thing you learned from that situation?
Go with my gut. Like when we were getting into it, I knew, like I could see the writing on the wall, just because it was purely like a math thing that was going on. So, and I agreed to something that I actually didn't agree to. So like that was definitely the hardest part for me, is I was signing to something that I knew in my heart of hearts was wrong.
Yeah.
And not to say I created the situation down the road, because it would have happened one way or the other, but it was very clear to me that I knew what was going to happen. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, like I think that the difficulty of it, like looking at that, is when two people are fighting, like many times it's not just those two people. Like her and I get along wonderfully, right? Like, but whenever we're arguing, we find it's usually because of someone that's not a part of the conversation. You know what I mean? Like you find somebody usually starts it and then gently walks back into the background. And that's how it was in this situation. Like we don't fight, and we find ourselves arguing a lot in this situation. It was because of someone else.
So what'd you learn from that? Biggest takeaway for you, Jeremy?
Well, one of the things that we've been really good at is we often say exactly what we're thinking, but without the intention to hurt the other person. And because of that, we're able to solve a lot. I think a lot of people like sit on something. Do you know what I mean? Where they sit on something, and Brielle's many times like, like, hey, I'm feeling that, and this is how it made me feel. What are we going to do about this? Or, vice versa. And I think because of that, we can actually handle the thing rather than sitting on the thing. But many times people sit on it and then they get passive aggressive, and, it's kind of the end of it, when it's like, all right, well, let's just call a spade and talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a great learning.
Yeah.
It's a great learning. So again, there's all these mysteries around alchemy of turning base metal into gold, which is really just a metaphor. When you understand really what they're conveying, they're saying taking something that appears to be trash and turn it into treasure. And so if you take these difficulties and you learn from them and you apply that learning, then it does become treasure. It really does. And it enlightens you and guides you moving forward. So what else do we want to talk about? This has been great so far.
It has. Go ahead.
No, go for it, Bray.
No, I just want to say something to your point there. Like, we've spent a lot of time recently just going over our personal brand standards. And that's actually something I think that we're kind of on the same concept with, because we're talking a lot about in our brand that you need to learn from those losses, and you need to learn from those moments of pain and come through them.
Yeah.
The winners and the losers, and you need to not get the trophy so that you can learn why you didn't get the trophy and get better and get your own trophy. So
because society so often, like, they want to tell us, like, you don't want to lose, but so let's just not try it so we don't lose. And it's like there's a ton of value in losing if you figure out how to use it so you don't lose again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not really
I really
losing.
like where you're going.
Yeah, it's not really losing. If you're applying it, then you're winning. You really are winning, even when it appears you're losing.
Yeah.
So no participation trophies in your world.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
No more partnerships.
Yeah. Well, that's Bersabeh's learning from our last.
Well, it's interestingly enough, like I think we've talked about that before. Like, no partnerships we aren't married in.
And you're probably not going to be in another marriage, so that's
there
pretty
you
much
go.
no partnership.
I don't think so. As far as
Yeah.
I know.
The girls always go, "Oh, when you get married, can we do this?" I'm like, "No, we've only had one wedding. This is a one wedding lifetime."
Yes, exactly.
Well, you
can
can
have
read
many
up your
parties.
vows.
So
So
how-
I will say this. I
Yeah, go.
want to ask this because it's very rare to find it in today's world. And in your guys' age bracket, I know you're mid 30s. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm 36 and
36.
Brielle's
I'm
32.
32.
Okay, 32. And I find it with working with you guys and your team and your wife, you guys are all part of the same team, that you're very driven and you're professional and you're on it, and that's very hard to find nowadays, especially in the younger age. So I'm wondering, where does that discipline and drive come from you guys, for you guys?
Like we've always just kind of like tried to be professionals at everything we've done. I think that's really important to like always apply professionalism. But we were actually because I wrote the brand standards and then Brielle was editing them to make sure like people could fully receive them.
Mhm.
And this morning we were going over. There's a quote by Vince Lombardi. I don't know if you guys, Vince Lombardi, the famous
Sure.
Green Bay Packers coach,
Sure.
probably the most famous football coach of all time. And he talks about this idea of continually chasing perfection, knowing fully that perfection isn't possible, because in that you're going to catch excellence. And that's a lot of how we carry ourselves, right? Like we're going to do the best job that we possibly can. And we're always going to know that can be better, right? Like Brielle's main job at our company is quality control. And you don't see that at a PR agency because we always know we can do better and we always want to do better. And I think a lot of people, aren't willing to do that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's something that we look for too in people that we surround ourselves with. Like, I mean, just personally, like we look at one of the reasons that we chose our au pair, who's with our family, is she was a competitive, like the current gold Olympian swimmer was part of her swim team, and then she had a life circumstance that took her out of the running to compete in the Olympics. But like, she's an Olympic level swimmer. Like we want to surround ourselves with people of excellence.
It's just what we want to do.
Yeah, somebody else on our team, we just helped. She left us, but she's now doing her next thing, and we're really proud of her.
Yeah.
But she was a violaist.
No, she was the first chair violinist in an orchestra. So she was
Wow.
Yeah.
like we try to surround ourselves with people that are excellent and continually trying to be excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, that's important.
It really is important. And it's refreshing, because it's so rare. And I firmly believe that when you can have that excellence, it makes you stand apart so much easier in the marketplace because there's so few people that are even doing more than just enough to get by.
Yeah,
And so,
for sure.
yeah, keep doing what you're doing. How can our viewers learn more about you and what you do?
Well, if they want to, really get out there and get the right attention, we talked about Brielle's PR strategy and a lot of how we're trying to help our clients get out there. We put together a really great resource for people on how they can apply a lot of basic PR strategies to get out there and start growing their brand and start creating more attention. So if they head over to crushitonpodcast.com, there's a really great resource over there for them. It's going to help them really get ahead of where they are now, and there'll be other options and ways to connect with us there.
Nice.
Yeah, and we'll put
I'll put the links
We'll
in.
put
Yeah.
the link down below. Crush it on podcast. Is that what it was?
That's correct. Yeah.
.com.
.com.
That's
yeah.
That's pretty good.
And we highly recommend these.
We
too.
highly recommend. So, hey guys, it's been a great conversation, and thank you so much for your time and your energy and all the amazing things you're doing on the planet. Keep doing great work. The world needs you.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Okay.